The film tells the story of Wade Porter, a factory worker who lives with his girlfriend, Laura, and their son, Michael. Wade intends to apply for a loan in order to get married to her. One day, Laura appears very happy when she finds out that Wade has finally received the bank loan. Everything seems to be going perfectly, but everything changes in one night. Wade and Laura wake up from their sleep at the sound of an intruder's footsteps. He then wakes Laura and grabs a baseball bat. The two go to Michael's room and are happy to see that their son is okay. Wade asks Laura to look after Michael while he searches the house for the burglar. Wade finds the intruder in the kitchen and then chases him out of the house. Wade hits him in the head with the baseball bat, killing him in his own backyard. Wade realizes that he has just killed someone and feels guilty, even though he did it by accident. Not long after, the police arrive, and an officer claims that Wade killed the intruder when he was already running away. Moreover, he did not have a weapon on him, so Wade's actions cannot be considered self-defense. Wade and Laura attempt to justify themselves, but he is still arrested and charged with murder. On his first day in prison, Wade has a problem with Tinto, a black inmate who was offended and humiliated because Wade looked at him. Although he had simply stared at the man for no particular reason, the two began to fight. The guards separate them and take Wade to the holding cell with 4 other strong men. The prisoners let him take a bed and told him that he must clean the floors twice a week. The next day, Laura visits Wade in prison and tells him that her son keeps asking about him. Laura then declares that she will find a good lawyer to help him get out of prison. Wade is then approached by a lady who will become his public defender, who tells him that it will take $1 million to get him out of prison. Wade admits that he doesn't have that kind of money. However, his public defender declares that he would do everything he could to lighten his sentence. That night, a ruckus breaks out in San Quentin prison. Inmates become enraged and attack each other. Guards are forced to use tear gas to quell the chaos. The next day, a man named Gordon travels to San Quentin prison to meet with one of the inmates, John Smith. Gordon declares that John will be in prison for life if he is found responsible for the riots that occurred at San Quentin prison the previous night. But John does not seem to care what Gordon says because he has only his missing son's birthday party on his mind. After the murder of his wife and children, it seems that John no longer cares about his life, especially after punishing the murderers of his family. In fact, he is in prison for killing the family of a man who murdered his wife and children. The scene then shifts to Wade, who is again visited by his public defender. The lawyer is convinced that if Wade accepts his guilt, he will receive leniency and a fine. Therefore, Wade has no choice but to obey her in order to get a reduced sentence. Wade pleads guilty at the suggestion of his public defender in exchange for a 3-year sentence for manslaughter. Subsequently, Wade is taken to prison on a bus. A man named Jake, sitting behind Wade, informs him of one of the most dangerous prisoners, Samuel, who is worth keeping an eye on. Samson abruptly rises from his seat and stabs another prisoner. He then gives Jake the bleeding knife. Jake, in a panic, hides the knife under Wade's chair and tells him to keep quiet about the stabbing incident, otherwise, Samson will kill him. As a result, the guards find the knife near Wade and place him in solitary confinement. Lieutenant Jackson questions Wade about the stabbing, but he refuses to answer. Lieutenant Jackson decides to assign Wade to the security housing unit, which he commands. Inmates in the security housing unit are high-profile criminals sentenced to death or life in prison. For the first 3 months, inmates in the security housing unit are subject to a 23-hour lockdown and are not allowed to have visitors. One day, Wade is escorted by guards into the camp, where numerous prisoners are gathered. A battle immediately breaks out between 2 prisoners, but no one attempts to separate them. In fact, the 2 prisoners are engaged in a gladiatorial duel, which Lieutenant Jackson and the other guards observe and bet on. However, the 2 prisoners are hit with rubber bullets by the prison guards after the fight ends. One of the prisoners, dissatisfied with Lieutenant Jackson's restrictions, rebels by expressing his displeasure. The guards then take the prisoner to a room, where Lieutenant Jackson beats him severely. A few days later, Laura visits Wade in prison. They have not seen each other for 3 months, and Laura expresses how much she misses him. Laura then admits that she has run out of money to support herself and her son. Wade then suggests selling their property to make ends meet. In the next scene, John is transported to Wade's prison after receiving a life sentence for fomenting riots at San Quentin State Prison. John became Wade's cellmate in the security housing unit. Upon arrival, Wade appears startled by John and gives up his bed to him. The next day, the 2 are told to go to the yard, where the other inmates also gather. Wade meets with Jake, who informs him that Samson appreciates that he did not mention the stabbing on the bus. On the other hand, John recognizes and greets some of the inmates, who appear respectful toward him. Because he was often a troublemaker and was transferred from one prison to another, John became known as a power man in various prisons. Since John has a lot of experience in prison, he begins to give Wade suggestions and advice on how to survive. One day in the yard, Wade is forced into a confrontation with a prisoner named Turner. Initially, Wade is beaten, but then he turns the tables and beats Turner to a pulp. Lieutenant Jackson prevents a young officer named Collins from shooting Wade with a rubber bullet but orders him to shoot Turner in the leg. Lieutenant Jackson then takes his rifle and fires it himself because Collins hesitates. Wade is puzzled by Lieutenant Jackson's unexpected behavior in shooting Turner instead of him. But John reacts casually, adding that the guards set the rules of the prison and can therefore behave arbitrarily. One day, an investigator named Hammond makes his usual visit to the prison. The man inquires why there are still so many cases of fights in Lieutenant Jackson's prison. To avoid further suspicion, Lieutenant Jackson tries to convince Hammond that he can handle inmates well and works to reduce fights among prisoners. Laura visits Wade again, this time bringing her son Michael with her. Michael seems to be overjoyed to see his father, whom he has missed greatly. Laura then reveals that they are running out of money and having a difficult time, so Wade advises his fiancée to sell the house. Wade assures Laura that once he is released from prison, he will work everything out and they will start over. After the visit, Jake invites Wade to fight in the yard again. However, Wade is tired of following Jake's orders and points out that he has never fought. So, Jake and his henchmen start beating Wade. When the guards notice the ruckus, they fire tear gas at the inmates who are ganging up on Wade. Meanwhile, John is trying to help Wade by attacking Jake's men. After the chaos, John scolds Wade for being irresponsible and disobeying the orders of Jake, who turns out to be a mobster like Samson. The scene then shifts to Laura, who is sifting through documents as she plans to sell the house and move in with her mother for a while. One day, Wade is summoned to meet Samson in the yard, where Jake is also present. Jake becomes enraged when Wade disobeys his directions and complains about it to Samson. Samson then unexpectedly orders his henchmen to kill Jake. Samson explains that he saw how Jake passed the knife to Wade on the bus. Samson then gives Wade a chance to join his gang. When Wade returns to his holding cell, he asks John for advice on whether to accept or reject Samson's offer. According to John, Wade should accept Samson's offer because he is a thug with some clout in his prison. The next day, Lieutenant Jackson and Sergeant Roberts are sitting on the sidelines during their son's baseball game. On that occasion, Roberts expressed to Lieutenant Jackson his fear that they would be fired for their many abuses and tortures of prisoners. According to Roberts, Lieutenant Jackson should have started following prison rules and stopped torturing prisoners. Lieutenant Jackson insists that he will continue to follow his standards in prison because he is sure that his acts will not be discovered. One evening, Wade asks John why he did not kill his family's murderers. John explains that he intentionally kept the murderers alive and killed their families so that they could experience what it is like to live after losing everyone they cared about in this world. Laura returns to Wade's prison to visit him. She bursts into tears when she learns that Wade is part of a gang while she has to struggle alone to meet her son's needs. Finally, she leaves, leaving Wade furious. Later in the yard, Wade is attacked by one of the prisoners who has just entered. Lieutenant Jackson shoots Wade and then questions him again about the Samson stabbing incident. Wade, however, keeps his mouth shut and informs Lieutenant Jackson that he cannot say anything since Samuel has threatened him. Wade refuses to identify Samson as the killer on the bus, and Lieutenant Jackson falsely testifies that Wade was involved in the murder, causing Wade to receive 6 more years on top of his current sentence. As a result, Laura doesn't want to wait another 6 years and ends her relationship with Wade through a letter. Wade, devastated and outraged, resorts to fighting against the inmates because he now has nothing to lose. John advises him not to darken his eyes or express his anger irresponsibly. Wade, however, has lost all hope. One day, Officer Gordon and John's friend visited him in prison. However, John urges his friend to stop visiting him because it is a waste of time. The scene then shifts to Laura packing her things with the help of her mother. When she is about to relocate Wade's things, the son asks his mother why they are not taking his father's things as well. Laura tries to explain to her son that they are no longer living together with Wade, breaking the little boy's heart. Recognizing that Michael cannot live without his father, Laura returns to visit Wade in prison and promises to wait for him until he is released for Michael's sake. Wade is over the moon when he hears Laura's words. When Wade returns to his cell, he informs John of the excellent news. After talking to John, Wade devises a plan to tell the truth about the violence he suffered in prison and potentially get him released. John and Wade begin to strategize. First, Wade asks Lieutenant Jackson to allow him to fight a new inmate, Tinto, who was recently transferred to the section. Wade states that he wants revenge because he mistreated him. Lieutenant Jackson agrees to let Wade fight the new inmate on one condition: fight to the death. Then, Wade asks Laura to meet with Officer Gordon because, according to John, Gordon will undoubtedly help him uncover the persecution perpetrated by Lieutenant Jackson in prison. That Wade and Tinto are engaged in a furious conflict, but Wade has difficulty confronting Tinto. Laura and Gordon go to the jail with Investigator Hammond, where they plan to arrest Lieutenant Jackson for acting arbitrarily. John seems to be prepared, with his improvised weapon hidden under his glasses on the sidelines. After a while, Wade manages to turn the tables and knock Tinto out, but he refuses to kill him, which irritates Lieutenant Jackson. When Lieutenant Jackson is about to shoot Wade, John and the other prisoners intervene to protect him. Lieutenant Jackson is about to shoot all the prisoners, but Roberts tries to calm him down and tells him that acting recklessly would have dire consequences. Lieutenant Jackson then orders the prisoners back to their cells. When John and Wade are about to enter their cell, one of the guards appears and escorts them to the yard. Lieutenant Jackson enters and prepares to assassinate Wade, then blames John. However, Roberts chooses not to be present when Lieutenant Jackson kills Wade because he does not want to be an accomplice. Collins, on the other hand, surreptitiously reactivates the surveillance camera so that Lieutenant Jackson's abuse of the inmates could be seen on the footage. Lieutenant Jackson is ready to kill Wade when John intervenes by cutting his throat. However, another policeman in the yard shoots John, who dies as a result of his injuries. Collins hits the emergency button, prompting the other guards to go to the field. At the same time, Laura and Gordon also arrive with Investigator Hammond. With Gordon and Laura's help, Investigator Hammond succeeds in exposing Lieutenant Jackson's acts of corruption and persecution, and Wade's further sentencing is postponed. Wade is freed after 15 months and is finally reunited with his family. That's all from the video. Thanks for your time. And take care.